A tree-lined driveway winds past a hidden gate in the English countryside. Beyond it, a Georgian mansion sits in silence, wrapped in ivy and mystery, just like the man who lives within. Here, Benedict Cumberbatch writes his life away from the stage, surrounded by books, gardens, and timeless charm. But how did the boy who once taught English in a Tibetan monastery end up living like a 19th century poet with a Marvel fortune? Today, we unlock his private world. Before he became the world's most enigmatic detective, Benedict Cumberbatch was just a boy in Hammersmith, quiet, watchful, and curiously drawn to stories. But what happens when a child grows up with Shakespeare in one hand and silence in the other? Born into a family of stage performers, Benedict's path to the spotlight might seem pre-written. His father, Timothy Carlton, and his mother, Wanda Ventham, were both established actors. Their world was filled with scripts, rehearsals, and curtain calls. But even within that theatrical universe, young Benedict was different. He wasn't chasing applause, he was chasing meaning. At just 8 years old, he was sent to boarding school, first at Brambletye, then Harrow, one of the most prestigious institutions in the UK. There, surrounded by ancient libraries and chapel bells, Benedict didn't just study literature, he lived it. At age 12, he took to the stage as Titania in A Midsummer Night's Dream. It was a moment of strange magic. A boy in a dress, speaking lines older than the building he stood in, captivating an entire room. Could that be the spark that lit the fire? After Harrow, he didn't rush into fame. Instead, he paused. One gap year, one monastery, one life-changing decision. He flew to Darjeeling, India, where he taught English to Tibetan monks. Imagine that. The future Dr. Strange, kneeling on a stone floor, surrounded by saffron robes and silence. What did he learn there? About words, about patience, about humility? When he returned, he chose craft over shortcuts. He studied drama at the University of Manchester, then honed his technique at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. By the time he was ready to face the world, he wasn't just talented. He was dangerous in the way only the truly trained can be. But success didn't come with a bang. It came with a whisper. In 2004, Benedict took on the role of Stephen Hawking in the BBC television film Hawking. It was a quiet performance, devastating in its intelligence and restraint. The critics noticed. So did casting agents. And from that moment, the roles began to gather, like threads in a tapestry. Then came Sherlock. When Benedict Cumberbatch stepped into that long coat and high collar in 2010, the world tilted. His portrayal wasn't just brilliant, it was surgical. Fast-talking, emotionally complex, intellectually towering, a modern Sherlock for a digital age. Overnight, Cumberbatch wasn't just an actor, he was a global obsession. But what does a man do with that level of fame? For Benedict, it became a key, opening doors to new challenges. The Imitation Game, Dr. Strange, Patrick Melrose, The Power of the Dog. He moved effortlessly between Marvel blockbusters and art house gems, never sacrificing depth for dazzle. And yet, despite red carpets and Oscar buzz, Benedict never seemed to chase celebrity. Instead, he built something slower, more rooted. He formed his own production company, Sunny March, producing projects with literary soul. He gave interviews that felt more like meditations. And behind it all, he returned again and again to the one place where he could exhale, the countryside estate, quiet and sun-drenched, that would become his family's sanctuary. So how did the boy from Harrow, who once stood alone on a stage with Shakespeare in his throat, end up walking barefoot through a riverside garden, sipping tea with his children, far from the lights? The answer begins at the water's edge. Country house in London. Tucked away along one of London's most picturesque stretches of river, where willows bow to the water and time seems to move a little slower, stands a house that feels more like a novel than a structure. It's here, behind a gated driveway and under a canopy of ancient trees, that Benedict Cumberbatch has built his sanctuary. A $10 million Georgian-style country estate, not in the distant shires, but right within reach of the city's heartbeat. How does one create a countryside dream in the middle of London? Let's step inside and find out. The moment the gates open, you're greeted by manicured grounds that feel more like an estate in the English Cotswolds than a city property. There's a hush in the air, broken only by bird song and the gentle rustle of leaves. Ivy crawls along warm brick, and the house itself, symmetrical, dignified, and understated, seems to rise from the earth like it's always belonged there. As you approach the entrance, a grand reception hall sets the tone. And what a tone it is. A sweeping staircase arches upwards under a vaulted ceiling, a quiet nod to the theaters that shaped Benedict's early life. The light here is soft, golden, filtered through tall sash windows. Every detail, from the polished wood to the antique fixtures, speaks of timeless elegance. But this home is not a museum. It's alive. The kitchen, custom designed, blends rustic charm with refined taste. Picture green marble countertops, handcrafted cabinetry, and a centerpiece La Cornue stove that looks like it could feed an army or host a midnight snack during a script rewrite. This is where breakfast happens slowly, where tea is poured with intention, where children's voices echo as muffins rise in the oven. Off the kitchen, you'll find no fewer than 4 reception rooms, each with its own mood, one for music, one for reading, one for quiet conversation, and one, perhaps, where scripts are read aloud by firelight. Benedict doesn't just live in his home, he curates his space the way he curates roles, deliberately, intuitively, with reverence for both function and form. Upstairs, the story deepens. 7 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms. But it's the 2 master suites that truly sing. Each has its own dressing room, not showy, but spacious, practical, and deeply personal. Here, morning routines unfold like rituals. Here, Sherlock Holmes becomes a father of 3. Here, the actor becomes the man. And while the interiors are richly layered, it's the gardens that steal the show. Step outside and you're met with a riverside Eden. Verdant lawns stretch toward the water's edge. There's a 3-story treehouse tucked into the foliage, built not just for the kids, but also for wonder. It's said that Benedict often retreats there, not with a phone, but with a book, or sometimes nothing at all. There are quiet nooks under old oak trees, stone pathways that lead to garden benches arranged just so. A koi pond murmurs in the corner, and tucked behind a flowering hedge, a swimming pool glistens like a secret kept for summer. And this isn't just beauty for beauty's sake. The layout of the home, its flow, its open corridors, its sun-drenched corners, was designed with family in mind. Multiple generations can live and breathe here, in comfort and privacy. Each wing of the house offers space, solitude, and connection. A delicate balance that only the truly thoughtful achieve. There's even a private garage and secure gated parking. More practical than glamorous, but still a testament to the discreet luxury that defines this estate. No paparazzi lenses, no fanfare, just space. To think, to breathe, to be. And isn't that exactly what Benedict Cumberbatch has always sought? This house, with its layered history and literary soul, feels like an extension of him. Calm, curious, deeply rooted in tradition, yet never afraid of reinvention. It's a place where characters are born, where bedtime stories are improvised, where nature and intellect live in perfect rhythm. But beyond its walls and riverbank charm lies a man who, despite millions earned and roles immortalized, has never forgotten the power of art and the discipline it demands. So how did this tranquil estate come to be the heart of a global star's life? To understand that, we must first understand the fortune, carefully, quietly. That made it possible. In a world obsessed with box office billions and red carpet glam, Benedict Cumberbatch has quietly built a fortune. Not with noise, but with nuance. His net worth, estimated at $40 million, isn't the kind that shouts. It's the kind that whispers. Earned through years of choosing roles that matter, stories that linger, and partnerships that respect the art. His most lucrative chapter, no doubt, came with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As Doctor Strange, he entered a realm of global superstardom, multi-film contracts, back-end points, and international licensing deals. With each installment, Doctor Strange, Infinity War, Endgame, and Multiverse of Madness, the paychecks swelled. But what makes Benedict different is what he did with that success. He didn't chase yachts or skyscrapers. He chased purpose. In 2013, he co-founded Sunny March, a production company that became an extension of his values. Rather than chasing trends, Sunny March sought out stories with soul. Their debut project, Little Favor, was crowdfunded, a 30-minute thriller that proved even short films could make big statements. It wasn't about profit. It was about passion. From there, Benedict and his team moved into executive production, acquiring rights to literary works like The End We Start From and partnering with major networks to produce miniseries with intellectual weight. One by one, the projects built his legacy, not just as a performer, but as a cultivator of meaningful cinema. Beyond acting and producing, Benedict's income has come from voice work, documentary narration, brand campaigns for Jaguar and Sony, and even audiobooks. His voice, so distinct, so precise, became a brand of its own. Each commercial, each narration, carried the same elegance that defines his home, his art, his image. But perhaps most impressive is how balanced it all feels. He doesn't oversaturate himself. He doesn't appear everywhere, all the time. He chooses carefully, lives privately, and invests in longevity. That's the secret to his quiet fortune. Not just in dollars, but in dignity. So what does $40 million buy when the man behind it doesn't crave the spotlight? It buys space, like the country estate by the Thames. It buys creative freedom, like the power to say no to hollow scripts. And it buys time, with family, with causes he believes in, with silence. Because for Benedict Cumberbatch, wealth was never the destination. It was just the tool to live a life that feels like literature. But even with millions earned and the freedom to choose any role, any project, any home, Benedict Cumberbatch never lost sight of something far more valuable than fame or wealth. What good is a brilliant life, he once implied, if it doesn't illuminate someone else's path? And so, quietly, intentionally, he began giving back. Not for cameras, not for headlines, but because it was already written into the architecture of his soul. Philanthropy. It wasn't fame or fortune that first led Benedict Cumberbatch to give back. It was silence. A year spent teaching English to Tibetan monks in India, long before Sherlock, long before red carpets, planted the seed. There, in the quiet of the Himalayas, he discovered something deeper than performance: compassion, presence, and the power of giving without expectation. That spirit never left him. As his career blossomed, Benedict used his growing platform with uncommon grace. He became an ambassador for the Prince's Trust, supporting at-risk youth across the UK. But it wasn't just about attending galas. He showed up for campaigns, for mentorship, for the quiet work behind the scenes that never makes headlines. He's also been a patron for Dramatic Need, an arts charity that brings theater and storytelling to disadvantaged children across Africa. For Benedict, the stage is sacred, and sharing it with those who've never seen themselves in stories is more than a cause. It's a calling. One of his most moving acts came during his 2015 Hamlet run at the Barbican Theater. After each show, still drenched in sweat and Shakespeare, he would step forward and speak directly to the audience, not in character, but as himself. His message? A plea for support for Syrian refugees. Night after night, he asked for donations. Night after night, people gave. Over $180,000 was raised, not with fanfare, but with urgency, with human connection. His activism extended to Stand Up to Cancer, Save the Children, and the Royal Marsden Cancer Charity, where he joined forces with Prince William and designer Ralph Lauren. And when asked why he spoke out so often, Benedict's answer was simple: because I can, and because I must. In 2014, he even designed a Paddington Bear statue dressed as Sherlock Holmes, one of 50 figures placed around London, and later auctioned for the NSPCC. A small gesture, perhaps, but one that brought joy, whimsy, and thousands of pounds for children in need. He's also lent his name and voice to causes supporting the LGBTQ+ community, climate action, and media integrity, speaking out in open letters, press interviews, and public forums. Always thoughtful, always sincere. And while he's faced criticism for not hosting refugees in his own home, for being too political, Benedict never flinched. "Awareness is my job," he once said. "I'm not a government, but I am a citizen, and I believe in doing what I can, because for him, charity is not a moment. It's a lifestyle, a thread that runs through his home, his work, his family, like the quiet river outside his window, constant, steady, clear. And yet, for all his public compassion, for every speech, every fundraiser, every voice lent to a cause, there is another side of Benedict Cumberbatch that unfolds away from the stage. A side no spotlight can capture. The man behind the roles, the father behind the fame, the soul who, after giving so much to the world, returns each night to a slower rhythm of tea, of trees, of turning pages with the ones he loves. So what does stillness look like when it belongs to a global star? Personal life. He's played geniuses, monsters, broken men, and messiahs. But in real life, Benedict Cumberbatch seeks something far simpler: stillness. His personal life, by all accounts, is quiet. Not because there's nothing to tell, but because everything that matters happens away from the flashbulbs. At the heart of it is Sophie Hunter, a theater and opera director, and the woman he married in a windswept church on the Isle of Wight on Valentine's Day 2015. The ceremony, private, poetic, was followed by a reception at Modestone Manor, a setting straight from an English romance. But theirs is not a love story built on spectacle. It's built on 17 years of friendship, creative respect, and a shared language of art and depth. Together, they've raised 3 sons, names kept private, lives kept protected. Benedict has often spoken of the joy and grounding his children bring, calling fatherhood the most extraordinary thing he's ever experienced. In interviews, he lights up not when discussing premieres, but when recounting bedtime rituals, quiet walks, or mornings spent chasing butterflies in the garden. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the family temporarily relocated to New Zealand, where Benedict was filming The Power of the Dog. Surrounded by sweeping mountains and isolation, the experience was strangely perfect. "We were just a family," he said later. Cooking, walking, living, reconnecting. It's no surprise, then, that mindfulness and Buddhist philosophy are core to his way of life. Long before wellness became fashionable, Benedict was meditating. Still is. Not for trend, but for balance. A means to stay present, especially when the world demands so much noise. But silence hasn't always come easily. In 2005, while filming in South Africa, Benedict and two friends were kidnapped at gunpoint after their car tire blew out on a remote road. Held captive for hours, blindfolded and tied, he didn't know if he would survive. The experience, he said, reset him. It made him realize how fragile life is, and how urgent it is to live deliberately. Since then, his choices, in roles, in words, in family, have reflected that clarity. He rarely posts on social media. He seldom courts tabloid attention. Even his interviews are like conversations in a library. Thoughtful, paced, intentional. And when asked what he fears most, he once replied, wasting time. At home, his days are slow by design, reading scripts in the study, gardening with his sons, cooking with Sophie, practicing lines not for the spotlight, but because the craft still thrills him. That's the life he's built. Not a Hollywood fairy tale, but a literary one, lived in chapters, with space between the words. In the end, Benedict Cumberbatch doesn't just act with stillness, he lives in it. So, what did you discover behind the ivy-covered walls and the river-lit silence? If Benedict Cumberbatch's life surprised you, in its elegance, its quiet depth, its literary soul, imagine what other stories are still waiting behind closed doors. Like, subscribe, and tell us, whose world should we open next? Because every home hides a story, and every story deserves to be seen.